It was a cold night in a small countryside town. The rain had started early in the evening and grew heavier as hours passed. Lightning flashed again and again, and the wind blew through the trees like a wild storm. Roads were flooded, power lines had fallen, and the town was covered in darkness. Inside a small wooden house at the edge of town lived a young woman named Emily. She was 8 months pregnant with twins, waiting for her husband, Mark, to return from work. The storm was getting worse, and she felt uneasy. Emily kept looking at her phone, but there was no signal. The sound of thunder scared her. She closed all windows and sat near the lamp that was running on weak battery light. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her lower belly. She tried to calm herself, thinking it was just normal discomfort. But a few minutes later, another stronger contraction came, and this time she cried out. Her heart began to race. The babies were coming early. She tried calling her neighbor, but no one answered. She looked at the clock. It was past midnight. The rain outside was falling so hard, it sounded like waves crashing on the roof. Emily knew she had to get to the hospital, but there was no way to drive. The roads were blocked, and she could hardly move because of the pain. She started breathing heavily, praying that someone would come. Then, she heard a sound at the door, a deep, urgent bark. At first, she thought she was imagining it. But the bark came again, louder this time, mixed with the sound of scratching. She slowly stood up and walked to the door, holding her stomach. When she opened it, standing there in the rain was a large German shepherd. His fur was soaked, and his eyes were full of alertness and worry. Emily had seen this dog before, Rex. The canine police dog from town. Rex had been missing since the evening when his handler, Officer Daniels, went out for rescue duty in the storm. A lightning strike had scared many animals, and Rex ran off. The whole town thought he was lost. But here he was, right at Emily's door, barking as if he knew she needed help. Emily's tears mixed with the rain as she whispered, "Rex, how did you find me?" The dog barked again, stepped inside, and looked around. He could sense her pain and smell the fear in the room. He ran to the small bag near the door, a hospital bag Emily had packed weeks ago with baby clothes and papers. She pointed weakly toward it, her hands shaking. "Good boy. Take it," she whispered. Rex tilted his head for a moment, then grabbed the bag with his mouth and turned toward the door. Emily barely understood what he planned to do, but she hoped someone would see him. With the sound of thunder rolling above, Rex ran into the darkness. The journey to the hospital was long and dangerous. The roads were flooded, branches were falling, and the rain was cold. But Rex kept running. He had been trained for rescue work, and something deep inside him told him this mission mattered more than anything. The hospital lights were dim in the distance, barely visible through the sheets of rain. When Rex finally reached the entrance, nurses and guards looked up in shock. A soaking wet police dog was standing there, carrying a bag in his mouth. The guards shouted for help, and the hospital staff quickly came over. When they saw the hospital papers and Emily's name, they realized this was serious. One nurse said, "She's going into labor. She's alone at home." They called the paramedics and started preparing the ambulance. But the biggest surprise came next. Rex wouldn't leave. He barked, ran a few steps toward the door, then turned back, as if begging them to follow. The nurse said softly, "I think he wants us to come." Following the loyal dog, the ambulance began its slow journey through the storm. The driver struggled to see through the heavy rain, but Rex kept running ahead, stopping at crossroads, waiting for the headlights to catch up, then leading again. The team followed him for miles. Every time the road split, Rex chose the right path without hesitation. When they finally reached the edge of the forest road, Rex turned sharply and barked. The paramedics followed, shining flashlights through the trees. There, through the rain and darkness, They saw a small wooden house with its door half open. Emily was lying near the couch, her face pale, her body shaking. The team rushed inside. One of the nurses checked her pulse and said, "She's strong, but we need to move fast." They carefully lifted her onto the stretcher and covered her with a warm blanket. Emily's eyes opened weakly, and she saw Rex sitting nearby, breathing hard but watching her closely. She smiled through her tears and whispered, "You came back for me." Rex wagged his tail slowly. His fur was dripping wet, his legs muddy, but his eyes were full of life. He didn't move until the paramedics carried her out and placed her in the ambulance. Even then, he ran beside it as it rolled down the road, barking softly as if to say, "Don't worry, you'll be safe now." At the hospital, the doctors rushed Emily into the delivery room. She was exhausted, but she kept asking if the dog was safe. One nurse smiled and said, "He's right outside the door." He didn't leave. That made Emily close her eyes and finally rest outside. In the hospital hallway, Rex lay on the floor near the emergency doors. His body was covered in dirt and rain, but he didn't care. Officer Daniels finally arrived after hearing about the strange rescue story over the radio. When he saw Rex lying there, his heart nearly stopped. He knelt down and hugged the dog tightly, whispering, "You did good, boy. You did so good." The next morning, news spread around town about the brave K9 who guided an ambulance through a storm and helped save a mother and her unborn twins. People couldn't believe how he had found her house or how he knew what to do. But those who knew Rex said it was just his heart, the same loyal heart that had served his team for years. Emily woke up later that morning and asked softly, "Where's Rex?" Officer Daniels smiled and pointed toward the door. The German shepherd stood there quietly, wagging his tail, his eyes gentle. Emily reached out her hand, and he walked closer, resting his head near her arm. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Thank you, my hero." The hospital room was filled with warmth that no storm could take away. No one in that small town would ever forget that night. The night a brave dog ran through the rain to deliver not one life, but two tiny beating hearts, and the mother who carried them. The storm had finally passed. Morning sunlight filled the hospital room, and the air was calm again. Emily slowly opened her eyes, and for a few seconds, she didn't know where she was. Then she heard a baby's soft cry. Her heart filled with emotion as she realized her twins had arrived safely. A nurse stood beside her bed, smiling warmly. "You have two healthy girls," she said gently. "They're both doing great." Tears rolled down Emily's cheeks. She could not believe everything that had happened the night before. The pain, the fear, the storm, and then that brave dog who had come like a miracle. She asked in a soft voice, "Where's Rex?" "The German shepherd who helped me?" The nurse smiled and said, "He's outside with his handler. He refused to leave the hospital all night. He stayed by the door until you were safe." Emily wanted to see him. The nurse nodded and opened the door. In the hallway, Rex was lying quietly near the wall, his fur still a little wet, his eyes half closed from exhaustion. When he saw Emily awake, he slowly stood up and wagged his tail. Officer Daniels was sitting beside him, patting his head gently. He didn't move an inch. He said with pride, "He's been waiting for you." Emily smiled weakly and said, "Please, let him come in." The officer nodded, and Rex carefully walked into the room. He went straight to her bedside, sat down, and placed his head gently on the edge of the blanket. Emily reached out and touched his face. "You saved my life," she whispered. "You saved my babies." Rex's tail wagged softly, and for a moment, the room felt full of peace. Even the babies, resting in their small cribs, seemed calm. The nurse said quietly, "I've seen many things in this hospital, but never a dog this loyal. He's special." Later that afternoon, Officer Daniels told Emily the full story. He explained how Rex had gone missing during the storm. The canine unit had been helping people trapped by floods. A sudden flash of lightning frightened many animals, and Rex disappeared into the darkness. They searched all night, but couldn't find him. "I thought I lost him," Daniel said, his voice soft. "But somehow, he found you. And now we know why." Emily looked surprised. "Why?" she asked. Daniels took a deep breath. "Your husband, Mark, right? He used to help us train Rex a few months ago. He volunteered at the police department sometimes. He was the one who taught Rex a few new hand signals. Every time Mark arrived, Rex would get excited. He remembered him well. I think last night, when the storm hit, Rex picked up your scent, maybe from the old days when Mark used to bring you around. He must have recognized it and followed it through the storm." Emily covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling over. She remembered how Mark always talked about Rex, how smart and loyal he was, how gentle despite being a police dog. "He loved Rex," she whispered. "He said the dog had a heart like no other." Daniels nodded. "And Rex never forgot him. I think when he smelled your scent, something inside him remembered the person who once cared for him. That's why he came to you. He wasn't just helping a stranger. He was protecting his old friend's family." Emily couldn't stop crying. The truth touched her deeply. She looked at Rex, who was sitting quietly beside the bed, his brown eyes watching her gently. She placed her hand on his head again and whispered, "You didn't just save me, Rex. You came because of him." The dog tilted his head slightly, as if understanding every word. Over the next few days, Rex became like a hero in the hospital. Doctors, nurses, and even other patients came to see him. Children brought him small treats and patted his head. News reporters arrived, wanting to film the brave canine who had guided an ambulance through a deadly storm. They called him the Guardian of Hope. Emily named her twin girls, Hope and Grace. When the news reporter asked her why, she smiled softly and said, "Because that's what I felt that night. Hope when everything seemed dark, and Grace when life was given back to me. And this dog is the reason my daughters are alive today." When Emily was strong enough to leave the hospital, Officer Daniels helped her pack. Rex walked beside her, as if making sure she was safe until the very end. Outside, sunlight touched everything, and the town looked peaceful again. People stood around, clapping as Emily stepped out with her babies. Rex sat proudly beside her, his badge collar shining. Before she left, Emily turned to Officer Daniels and asked, "Can I visit him sometimes?" Daniels smiled warmly and said, "Of course. He'll always be happy to see you. You're family now." Weeks passed, and the story of Rex spread far beyond the small town. Newspapers wrote about him, and animal rescue groups shared his story online. People sent letters and drawings from all over the country. Some children wrote, "You are the bravest dog ever." Others sent pictures of Rex standing in the rain, carrying a hospital bag in his mouth. Emily often visited the police department with her babies. The first time she came, Rex saw her from across the yard and ran toward her with joy. He barked softly and sniffed the babies, then sat down, his tail thumping against the ground. It was as if he knew these were the lives he had saved. The babies reached out tiny hands and touched his fur, and he stayed perfectly still, gentle as a guardian. As time went by, Rex became a local legend. The town even organized a small event to honor him. The mayor gave him a medal that read, "For loyalty beyond duty." The crowd clapped, and Rex barked once, as if he understood. Emily held her daughters, smiling through happy tears. Years passed quickly. The twins grew up healthy and cheerful. Every year, on their birthday, they visited Officer Daniels and Rex. By then, Rex was retired from duty. His muzzle had turned gray, and his steps were slower, but his eyes were still bright whenever he saw Emily and the girls. One day, When the twins started school, they were asked to share a story about a hero. Both girls stood up proudly and said together, "Our hero is a dog. His name is Rex. He saved our mommy and brought us safely into the world." The whole class clapped, and the teacher smiled, saying, "That's the most beautiful story I've ever heard." Back at the police station, Rex spent his final years surrounded by love. Officer Daniels often took him to the park where the twins would play. Emily would bring treats and sit beside him, brushing his fur gently. "You're still our hero," she would whisper, and Rex would close his eyes, resting his head on her knee. Everyone in the town loved him. People said he wasn't just a police dog. He was proof that love never fades. Even after years passed, people remembered that stormy night when a German shepherd ran through wind and rain to deliver hope. And whenever someone in town faced hard times, they would often say, "Remember Rex, if he could find light in the storm, so can we." The memory of that loyal canine lived on in every heart he had touched. Emily's daughters grew up telling his story to their own children, keeping his name alive. And somewhere deep in their hearts, they always believed that the brave dog who saved them was still watching over them, their guardian, their protector, and their first true friend. Because sometimes, heroes don't wear uniforms or carry weapons. Sometimes, they walk on four legs, with eyes full of kindness and a heart that remembers love forever.